Welcome, restless dreamer. You've just stepped into the shadows of sleep, where stories whisper and the darkness listens. I'm your guide tonight, your voice in the void, here to lead you gently into nightmares wrapped in lullabies. Before we begin, press like if you're brave enough, and subscribe for more midnight tales that blur the line between sleep and terror. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and what hour has found you? When Rachel moved into the old Hollow Pine homestead, she wasn't looking for solitude. She was running from it. After her fiancé died in a car crash 6 months before their wedding, the grief had hollowed her out. So when her aunt left her a remote fixer-upper in the Ozarks, she packed what she could into a rental van and drove east without looking back. The property sat on 60 acres, hugged by thick woods and a dry creek bed. The main house leaned heavily to one side, but the barn, huge, gray, and skeletal, stood strong. Locals warned her the place was cursed, that people had gone missing near Hollow Pine. But Rachel didn't believe in ghosts. She believed in silence, until silence turned on her. It started with the barn. She didn't go inside for the first few weeks. She was too busy fixing leaks in the roof and patching windows. But one chilly October morning, she decided to explore it, half out of curiosity, half to see what she could sell. Inside, the air was thick with mildew and old hay. Rusted tools hung from beams like forgotten bones. On the far wall, half covered in a tarp, stood an antique seed drill and 2 iron cultivators. With winter coming and bills stacking, Rachel listed them on Facebook Marketplace. She got the usual messages, people wanting to trade goats, people asking if she delivered 5 hours away. Then came a clean message from someone named Eli Carter. He and his brother were starting a permaculture co-op a few counties over. They wanted to pick up all the equipment for full price. Cash. Could they come around 2 p.m.? His profile looked normal. Pictures with chickens, some kids. It all felt fine. But the wind howled that day, low and restless through the trees like it knew something was wrong. They showed up at 146. 2 men in a dented gray Dodge. One tall and slim, with sharp eyes and cracked lips. The other bald, with a long scar down the side of his neck. They smiled, but their eyes didn't. Rachel's 2 mutts growled low from the porch. "You must be Eli," she said cautiously. "Sure am," the tall one replied, sticking out a gloved hand. "This here's my brother, Micah." Micah didn't speak, just nodded and stared at the barn like it owed him something. "You boys can pull around back. The equipment's in the barn," she said, uneasy now but pushing through it. She led them inside, the door groaning shut behind them. "I dusted everything off," she explained, gesturing at the rusting equipment. "They probably need oiling, but they're in good shape." Eli stepped forward. His boots didn't make a sound on the old wooden floor. "Looks better than the pictures. You here all by yourself?" The air changed. She lied. "No, my cousin's in town. Should be back any minute." Micah moved to her side, too close. "Nice place. Real isolated." She reached for her phone, but Micah grabbed her wrist, fast and hard. The phone fell to the floor and cracked. "We won't take much," Eli said. "Just the truck, some tools, maybe a few minutes of your time." Rachel pulled away and stumbled back into a beam. The barn darkened. That's when the noise started. Low, vibrating, like breathing from the rafters. Micah froze. "What was that?" "I didn't hear anything," Eli said, voice suddenly sharp. "No, listen," Micah snapped, stepping back from Rachel, now scanning the shadows. Rachel had lived in silence for months. She knew the sound of creaking wood, of raccoons in the loft. This was different. This was wet, deep, alive. "Let's go," Eli muttered, suddenly nervous. Then the barn doors slammed shut, hard. Neither Rachel nor the brothers had touched them. Panic set in instantly. "Get the hell out of here," Eli shouted, dragging at the iron latch, but it held firm. Micah backed into the center of the barn, eyes wide. "What is this?" Then they heard the laughter. It came from above. Rachel didn't know how or when she'd started crying, but she knew she hadn't made the sound. Neither had they. A shadow moved along the rafters. "Who's up there?" Eli shouted, pulling a revolver from his coat. But it was too late. The light bulb overhead flickered once, then popped. Darkness swallowed them whole. They ran. Rachel dove behind a pile of hay bales while the brothers yelled, stumbled, cursed. Something slammed against the wall. A scream, Micah's, ripped through the dark. Rachel crawled across the floor, fingers bleeding from splinters. She reached a shaft of moonlight pouring through a hole in the wall and peeked out. Micah was gone. Only Eli remained, back to the barn door, gun shaking. "Micah? Mike!" A blur fell from the rafters. The sound that followed was not human. Eli's screams didn't last long. Rachel stayed hidden for hours, heart pounding against the dirt. She only moved when the silence returned. Not peaceful, watchful. She crawled out through a broken slat in the barn wall and ran to the house barefoot, not stopping until she slammed the door shut and locked it. The dogs barked at nothing for hours. She huddled in the pantry, shotgun across her lap. When morning came, the barn was open, empty, no blood, no truck, no bodies. But etched into the side of the seed drill was a message. "Alone isn't safe." The police came. She told them what happened, left out the thing in the rafters. They found tire tracks, but no sign of Eli or Micah. No registration on the truck. Fake Facebook account. Gone. Rachel stopped selling things online. She never entered the barn again, but sometimes when she's awake before dawn, she swears she hears breathing from the field, and someone, laughing in the dark. Lena Martin didn't know what else to do. Her younger brother Alex was spiraling, lost in addiction, debts, and broken promises. When she heard about a remote farm in Nebraska offering cash under-the-table work and room and board, she begged Alex to come with her. Maybe hard labor would sober him up. Maybe quiet days under the sun would remind him what it meant to survive. They arrived at Danbury Acres in late July. The road had turned to gravel miles back. Wheat fields stretched to the horizon in every direction, golden and whispering. There were no nearby houses, no lights beyond the moon. The farmhouse looked too clean, the fields too neat, and the silence unnerving. A tall man in his 50s, Mr. Farrow, greeted them at the gate. He wore clean boots, a spotless flannel shirt, and the kind of smile that didn't touch his eyes. "You'll sleep in the west bunkhouse. Work starts at 5 a.m. sharp. No wandering after dark. The fields don't like it." Lena thought he was joking. Alex just laughed. "Fields don't like it? What, are they haunted?" Farrow didn't answer, just handed them keys. There were 5 other workers, quiet, withdrawn, none local. A girl named Petra had worked there 3 months. A man named Davis was missing most of his left thumb. Nobody talked much, but Lena noticed something strange. They all avoided one corner of the bunkhouse near the window. That night, she couldn't sleep. The wind outside carried a low electric hum, like a giant insect buzzing underground. She sat up and looked toward the fields. A strange bluish light shimmered along the ground like heat mirage, but cooler, alive. She nudged Alex. "Do you hear that?" He groaned and turned over. "Shut up. You're just tired." But she wasn't. The work was hard, stacking irrigation pipes, harvesting early corn, spraying pesticides. They weren't allowed phones. Farrow insisted the signal messed with the rhythms. No one argued. His rifle always rested by the porch. At dinner, Lena asked Petra what Farrow meant about the fields. Petra whispered, "Don't step in them after dusk, especially the west field. That's where it's strongest." "What is?" Petra stared at her. "The hum. If it gets inside you, it doesn't leave." Alex joked about it all week, calling it the crop ghost. But Lena saw his hands tremble more each night. He was waking with nosebleeds, fingernails torn in his sleep. "I keep hearing someone whispering my name," he said once, from under the floor. On the 10th day, Davis didn't come to breakfast. "Probably left," Farrow said flatly. "Weak ones always do." Petra didn't look convinced. He was afraid. He said the hum followed him into his dreams. That night, Lena checked Davis's bed. His wallet was still under the mattress, boots neatly by the door. "No one leaves like that," she told Farrow, who only narrowed his eyes. "Mind your work. This land has rules." Alex started pacing at night, muttering, scratching at his skin. "It's in me," he hissed. "I felt it crawl under my ribcage. I don't know how to get it out." Lena begged him to leave. "We'll hitchhike. Walk if we have to." But the truck was always locked. The radio was silent static, and the nearest town was 18 miles away. On the 12th night, Lena woke to find Alex gone. She ran to the door and saw the shimmer, deeper blue now, pulsing, like veins under skin. She sprinted barefoot into the west field. The stalks were twice as tall as usual. The hum was deafening. She called his name over and over, but her voice was swallowed by something deeper than wind. And then she saw him, standing perfectly still in the center of the field, back to her, shirt soaked in blood. "Alex!" she cried. He turned around slowly. His eyes were glowing. "Too late," he whispered. "It's beautiful in here." He vanished, like mist pulled downward. The hum stopped. So did the wind. Pharaoh didn't deny it. The next morning he sat on the porch polishing his rifle. "This land is old. Older than people." "You knew," Lena said, shaking. "You bring people here to feed it." He nodded. "The soil stays rich. Crops never fail. It's a fair trade." Lena grabbed a hoe from the shed and swung it at him. But he was faster. The rifle cracked. Her shoulder exploded in pain. "You'll stay now," he muttered, dragging her back to the bunkhouse. "The field didn't want you this time, but it might next harvest." Petra found her that night, helped bind the wound, told her about the old trail through the wheat that the land forgot. Too shallow, too narrow for the hum to reach. At dawn, while Pharaoh slept, they ran, through broken fences, past the silent truck, into the east field where no one had planted for years. The hum followed, distant, angry, but it couldn't reach them there. When they made it to the road, Petra flagged down a tractor. They never looked back. Pharaoh vanished soon after. So did Danbury Acres. No one would buy the land. Locals claimed the wheat grew in strange spirals. Birds avoided the skies above it. Lena never found Alex again. But sometimes, just before sleep, she hears the hum beneath her pillow, faint, patient, waiting, and she wonders if the field is done with her, or if it's just waiting for the right season. The orchard was quiet in that late August haze, the kind of stillness that settles deep in your bones when you're completely alone. My parents had gone to Albany for a wedding, leaving me with a fridge full of leftovers, a chore list I'd already blitzed through and nothing but time. I was 17, old enough to be trusted, bored enough to start poking around places I wasn't supposed to. That's how I found the map. It was rolled up in the back of my great-grandfather's old workbench in the tool shed, stuck between yellowed newspapers and a rusted wrench. The hand-drawn layout showed the orchard, the creek, the boundaries, and something near the woods, unmarked on modern satellite maps. A rectangle labeled simply cold storage. I didn't know why it caught my eye. Maybe because it was hidden. Maybe because I remembered my grandfather warning me when I was a kid. Stay away from the slope behind the cherry trees. That's where the ground breathes wrong. Back then, I thought he was being weird. Maybe now I should have listened. I found the spot by mid-afternoon, swatting gnats and stepping over gnarled tree roots. The trapdoor was buried under a tangle of vines and loose dirt, sealed shut with a rusted padlock. The hinges groaned as I forced it open. Cold air breathed up from below. It smelled of rot and wet stone. With a flashlight in one hand and my phone in the other, I started down the old stone steps. The cellar was massive, way too big for a root cellar. The first chamber was lined with wooden shelves, most rotted away. Jars sat in clusters, their contents cloudy, floating, unrecognizable. Something like a shriveled hand pressed against the inside of one. I stepped back, heart thudding. "Just pickled vegetables," I muttered, but I didn't believe it. I moved deeper. A second chamber opened up, this one with hooks dangling from the ceiling. Some still held ropes. Others had rusted blades lying beneath them. There was an old ledger on a table, pages crinkled and stained. Names, dozens of them. Next to each, a note. Processed, rendered, preserved. My skin went cold when I saw one name I recognized. Danny Alcott, my grandfather's childhood friend. I'd seen their old baseball photo. Danny's name was marked. Cured. I backed up. My flashlight flickered. Somewhere beyond the chamber, something scraped across stone. I turned to leave, panic rising fast, but part of the ceiling had collapsed behind me. The way out was gone. My phone had no signal. Battery at 29%. I shouted, "Hello?" But it echoed back empty. I didn't want to keep going, but there wasn't a choice. The tunnels curved ahead, descending. The stone grew slick and cold. The walls were lined with hooks, faded family portraits, and finally, cages. 10 of them. Heavy iron bars. Some still held bones, tiny, curled up, as if whoever had been inside had died waiting. On the far wall, a black and white photo hung crooked in a frame. A man I recognized from our hallway upstairs, my great-grandfather. But in this photo, he was grinning, holding a cleaver, and standing behind someone chained to a wall. I dropped the flashlight. That's when I heard it. Shuffling. Wet, dragging steps. I froze. Whatever was coming wasn't rushing. It didn't need to. It knew I was trapped. I ducked into a corner and watched as it entered the chamber. It was tall. Too tall to be anything human. Its back hunched, its arms too long, legs mismatched. The skin looked patchworked, like leather stretched over too many wrong shapes. Its mouth had been sewn shut, but one corner had torn free. A horrible breath hissed from it. Its head turned toward me, but it didn't move closer. It just stood there, breathing. Then, after what felt like forever, it shuffled away. I waited until the air grew silent again, then crept forward. My flashlight was cracked, barely glowing. I found another chamber, the smallest yet. Inside, a reel-to-reel projector sat on a table, with a hand crank. I turned it. The projection flickered to life on the stone wall. Grainy footage appeared, home video style. A young man, laughing. My great-grandfather. Others behind him, masked, dragging someone struggling into frame. The camera panned to what I now knew was the cellar, then to a ledger, then to the cleaver, then to screams. I vomited in the corner. They weren't storing food here. They were preserving something else. I stumbled out of that room and found a side path I hadn't noticed before, half collapsed and dripping water. My flashlight was dead now. I used my phone, keeping the brightness low. A soft sound followed me. Breathing again, closer this time. Then I saw the exit, a narrow crawl space with a rotted wooden ladder leading up to the surface. I crawled into it. The ladder groaned. My foot slipped on one rung and I almost screamed. That's when the creature grabbed my leg. Its grip was cold and crushing, but not strong enough to pull me back entirely. I kicked with my free leg, smashing the heel of my boot into its face again and again. Something crunched. It howled. A deep, gurgling sound that echoed up the shaft like a dying animal. With a final kick, I pulled free, scrambling up the last rungs and slamming the trapdoor shut above me. I collapsed into sunlight, gasping, shaking. The orchard was golden and bright, utterly normal. Birds chirped, wind rustled leaves. It felt like waking from a nightmare, except I still smelled rot in my hair and felt blood crusted on my shin. I ran home. My parents came back that evening to find me locked in the bathroom, sobbing and trembling. I told them everything. We returned with police 2 days later, but the entrance was gone. A sinkhole had opened over the trapdoor, swallowing everything. Nothing was left. No tunnel, no bones, no creature. Weeks passed. Life went on. Sort of. I couldn't sleep without the lights on. I couldn't walk into the orchard without flinching at shadows. Eventually, my parents put the house up for sale. Too many memories, they said. Too much guilt. They never found proof of what happened down there. No bodies, no footage, nothing. But I remember. I remember the ledger, the screaming film, the cold stitched mouth. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I still hear breathing. Soft, patient, waiting. Never thought the fields would feel haunted. Not in the way people talk about ghosts or spirits, but in the quieter way, like something was always watching, even if it was just the weight of memory. It was late October when I came back to the farm. The corn was almost ready, tall and dry, waiting for someone to harvest it before the frost came. Uncle Ray called it a blessing. I called it an obligation. My dad had passed the year before, and this was our first season without him. He used to run the combine. No one else touched it. The rusted red beast sat by the barn, wheels sunken slightly into the earth like it didn't want to move. Uncle Ray asked if I wanted to drive it this time. Said Dad always bragged I had a feel for machines. I agreed, more out of guilt than pride. The first few rows passed smoothly. The air was sharp and cold in the mornings, warm by midday. The fields stretched endlessly under the flat Nebraska sky. The combine groaned and roared through the dry stalks, chewing them down in clean mechanical lines. But by the third day, it started acting strange. Each time I passed the southeast edge of the field, Where the trees grew closest to the rows, the engine stuttered. Nothing huge, just a cough, a flicker on the gauges, then smooth again. I chalked it up to old wiring, dust, cold mornings. Then the GPS glitched. It wasn't fancy, just a basic unit we'd mounted last year, but the screen scrambled every time I neared the same stretch of trees. One pass, the whole system shut off completely. When it came back on, my location had shifted 40 feet, and the system thought I was plowing through the road. I told Ray. He just shrugged. That's the old part of the field. Maybe the soil messes with it. I wasn't so sure. The next day, I decided to walk that part of the field before starting the engine. The soil did look different. Darker, denser, almost oily. I pressed my boot down and it sank further than expected, and something about the air was off. It was cooler, like standing near a cellar vent, but there was nothing there. No holes, no wires, no reason to feel strange. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had gone wrong here before. That night, I asked Uncle Ray about Dad's last season. He paused, stirred his coffee. He wasn't himself toward the end, he said. Said he kept seeing things. Faces in the glass. He started locking the cab at night. Faces? Maybe he was tired. Maybe it was the meds. I don't know. But he swore the machine was acting on its own. That it wouldn't stop sometimes. Like something was guiding it. I didn't sleep well. A few mornings later, I climbed into the combine early. The frost hadn't melted yet, and the field shimmered with silver light. The sky was overcast, heavy with low clouds. I turned the key. Nothing. I tried again. It clicked, then coughed. Finally, the engine roared to life. But the radio turned on too. It was an old analog unit, rarely used, always off. This time, it buzzed with static. Then, faintly, through the noise, "Kayla!" I jumped, turned the knob. Nothing changed, just static. I pulled the fuse and cut the power. I told myself it was interference, a fluke, old wires. But my hands shook on the wheel as I guided the combine back into the rows. Late that afternoon, I passed the southeast section again. The combine stuttered, then stopped, dead in its tracks. I cursed and climbed down to check the engine. No leaks, no smoke, but the battery was draining, lights dimming by the second. Then I noticed it, something sticking out of the ground, half covered by corn husks and dirt. I brushed it away. Metal, rusted, a square hinge, a hatch. I pried it open. Beneath was a narrow wooden staircase leading down into blackness. It smelled like mold and old hay, and something else, something like fuel. I shouldn't have gone down, but I did. The cellar was small, maybe 10 feet square. The walls were stone. The air was damp. On the far wall hung tools. Farming tools, mostly. But there was something else. A journal, wrapped in plastic. I took it up into the daylight. That night, I read the entries. They dated back to 1935. It was my great-grandfather's handwriting. He wrote about the Dust Bowl, about the corn dying, about the desperation. One entry read, "Lost another hand today. The machine wouldn't stop in time. No one blamed me, but I felt it, like it wanted blood, like it knew." Another, "Sometimes when I close my eyes, I hear the engine running even when it's off. It speaks in a language I don't know." The rest was scribbles. Nonsense. Half legible. Paranoia, I figured. Grief. But I couldn't explain the feeling I got every time I passed that part of the field, or the way the combine seemed to move smoother afterward. Almost satisfied. On the final day of harvest, a storm rolled in. Ray wanted to wait. I insisted on finishing. The rain came fast, slapping the metal roof of the cab. Thunder cracked across the sky. I turned off the headlights to avoid attracting attention. That's when the cab locked itself. The door handle wouldn't budge. The wheel jerked from my hands. The combine veered left, straight toward the southeast patch. I hit the brakes. Nothing. The machine spun in place, chopping the same rows again and again. The engine howled. On the touchscreen, the GPS glitched into a spiral. A red dot pulsed over the hatch. I pounded on the glass. Screamed. Outside, lightning struck a tree, splitting it in half. Then, silence. The combine shut down. The door unlocked. Ray found me an hour later, soaked and shaking beside the machine. I didn't tell him everything, just enough to explain the torn-up rows. He nodded slowly. Didn't ask more. Maybe it's time we sold her, he said. Let someone else take her apart. We did. A month later, a scrapyard hauled the combine off the property, but the field never grew right again. Corn twisted, rows warped. That southeast patch stayed darker than the rest, and sometimes, when the wind is just right, I swear I still hear it, the engine, trying to start. I never planned to return to Iowa. After the divorce, I just needed a roof and somewhere quiet to regroup with my daughter, June. The farmhouse had been in my family for generations, sitting just outside Silver Ridge, a forgotten blip of a town surrounded by cornfields and dust. It wasn't ideal, but it was ours. June, 7 and sharp as a tack, didn't complain much, but she missed the city. The farmhouse had no real internet, no pizza delivery, and no friends her age. Just creaky floors, the hum of bugs, and the vast field behind the house. Rows and rows of corn that no one had tended in years. Yet somehow, impossibly, it still grew. The field always moved, even when the air was dead still. It was our third week on the farm, when June first mentioned Red. He lives at the end of the corn, she said at breakfast, spooning cereal into her mouth like it was no big deal. Red? I asked. She nodded. He has button eyes and talks like a whisper. He says he used to be part of the land. My stomach twisted. I told myself she was just making up stories. She was creative, maybe too much so. That evening I found her drawings on the floor, red stick figures with sewn grins standing among towering yellow stalks. One figure was smaller, held by a hand stretching up from the soil. It stood at the far edge of the cornfield one morning. A scarecrow. I hadn't built one. No one should have. Its body was slouched but tall, made from old denim and burlap. The sack for a head was stitched crudely, and its mouth was sewn into a wide, jagged smile. Crows circled it, but none landed. June stared at it for a long time from the porch. Red made it, she said. It keeps the bad roots down. That night I heard something dragging along the siding, like dry stalks brushing the house. I didn't sleep. In town, I asked around. No one admitted to placing the scarecrow. When I mentioned the field, an older woman, Mrs. Harder, stiffened. That place don't take kindly to outsiders anymore, she said. It remembers everything, even the bad blood. I tried to laugh it off, but she grabbed my wrist, hard. Keep your girl away from the rows. That night, I found June standing at the back door barefoot, eyes wide, whispering something I couldn't quite hear. I went to the post office the next day. Gone an hour, maybe 2. When I returned, the front door was open. June's bike lay on its side in the grass, the front wheel still slowly spinning. Her half-empty juice box sat beside it. Her hoodie was draped over the porch rail. I called her name. Nothing. Then I saw the footprints in the dirt, small and fresh, leading straight into the corn. We hadn't planted corn in years. I hesitated at the edge. The stalks were tall, brown, and dry, but alive. I could feel it. They leaned inward, forming a narrow path. I stepped in. With each step, the air grew heavier. The sounds of birds, wind, insects, all gone. Only my breath remained, and the distant rustle of something unseen. A few yards in, I found June's hoodie, balled up in the dirt. Her earbud was next to it, cord stretched as if torn away in a rush. Her phone lay a bit further, cracked screen still glowing. Music was playing, a lullaby I didn't recognize, and then I heard it. A slow, steady breath. Not mine. I froze. It sounded like someone inhaling deeply, but through something dry and unnatural, a throat full of dust. I turned. Something large shifted in the stalks to my left. Not footsteps, more like dragging. I ran. The path I'd made coming in was gone. Every stalk looked the same. The light above seemed dimmer. The sky, gray and low, pressed down. I screamed for June until my throat burned. Something brushed my shoulder. I spun around. Nothing. I kept running, heart hammering, but the rouse never ended. After what felt like hours, I stumbled into a circular clearing. At its center stood the scarecrow, but it moved. It lifted its head, slowly. Its eyes were buttons. Its mouth was stitched shut, but I could feel it grinning. Red, I whispered. Its voice wasn't spoken. It rose in my head like static. The land demands its due. It never lets go. I backed away. Where's my daughter? The scarecrow tilted its head. The corn behind it parted, revealing June, standing silently. Her skin was pale, her eyes dark and distant. She's learning, Red said. She's becoming part of it now. I'll take her place, I said. Let her go. The scarecrow stepped aside. The earth beneath June cracked open, revealing thick, gnarled roots twisting in unnatural patterns. Red leaned close. She stepped into the rose. She belongs to the rose now. You may walk, but you cannot undo. I grabbed June's hand. It was cold. She looked up at me and whispered, "He says you're too late." The corn bent around us like arms. My vision blurred. My legs buckled. Then, darkness. I woke on the porch. June was inside, asleep on the couch, her hoodie neatly folded, her phone charging. Had I imagined it? I checked her for scratches, bruises, nothing. She smiled when I hugged her and asked if we could make pancakes, but something was wrong. That afternoon, I saw her speaking to the scarecrow from the porch. She never said a word out loud. June returned to herself, or something close. She laughed. She played. But sometimes, when she walks near the corn, it leans toward her. I found a second scarecrow weeks later. It looked like me. Same clothes, same eyes, same grin. I burned it. But the next morning, it was back. This time closer to the porch. The field lies still, for now, but it remembers, and it's always hungry. After her uncle's death, Dana inherited a crumbling farmhouse outside the ghost town of Cold Briar. With no job and nowhere left to go after the divorce, she packed up what little she had and moved in with her 8-year-old son, Toby. Cold Briar wasn't on any map anymore. Just a dirt road flanked by hollow buildings, their windows like watching eyes. The air smelled like pine needles and rusted metal, and the silence out there was so thick it rang in your ears. The farmhouse itself was hunched like an old man. 2 stories of warped wood, a sagging porch, and a cellar door around the side that creaked with every breeze. It had been empty for years, Dana assumed, though it smelled faintly of candle wax and iron. The first night, Dana set up sleeping bags in the living room. Toby kept glancing at the floor. "What's wrong, bud?" He leaned close and whispered, "There's a tapping under the house. Someone's down there." Dana brushed it off as rats. The place was ancient, but by the third night, even she heard it. Rhythmic, measured, like fingertips drumming just below her feet. She told herself it was pipes. Old houses groaned and creaked. That's all. But then things began to change. Toby stopped eating. He started talking to the floor, having full conversations with someone, or something, she couldn't hear. One morning, she found muddy footprints leading up from the basement door to Toby's room. His tiny hands were clean, and when she opened the cellar door, all she saw was dark. No footprints, no mud, just the smell of damp stone and something faintly metallic. When she asked Toby about it, he said, "Mr. Hollow wanted to see my drawings. He lives below the floor." Dana didn't sleep that night. The storm came on a Sunday evening. There had been no warning, no rumble, just silence. And then suddenly, the sky turned dark green and pelted the earth with ice. Dana rushed to close the windows as thunder cracked like a whip over the hills. The lights flickered, then died. "Stay here," she told Toby, handing him a flashlight. "I'm checking the breaker." She ran to the back, but the breaker box was dead. As she returned, a gust of wind slammed against the house so hard it groaned. That's when she heard the cellar door creak open. She froze. "Toby!" she yelled. "Get away from the basement!" But there was no answer. Just the distant sound of the cellar stairs creaking one by one. Downward, Dana sprinted across the house, yanking open the old door. The beam from her flashlight sliced into the dark, catching only the beginning of the stairs before they disappeared into blackness. "Toby!" she screamed into the silence. A voice answered from below, but it wasn't her son. "Down here," it said. Too deep, too dry, almost like breath over broken glass. She backed away. Then she heard Toby's cry. She plunged into the darkness. The cellar was colder than it should have been, like a refrigerator buried in earth. Her flashlight flickered and buzzed. Water dripped from the beams. She followed the cries down the narrow stairs and saw muddy footprints, Toby's, leading toward a wall at the back. Except, it wasn't a wall. It was a door. Not wood, not metal. Stone. Sealed. But the footprints led straight to it. "Toby?" she whispered. Behind her something moved. The sound of bare feet on concrete. She turned. No one. When she faced the door again, it was open. Beyond it, a tunnel, a mine shaft. Please. Toby's voice came from inside. Weak, fading. She stepped through. The tunnel descended like a throat into the earth. Cracked beams held up rotten walls, and old cart rails ran along the floor, swallowed by dirt. The deeper she went, the more the air felt wrong. Not cold, hollow, like it had been scraped clean of life. She found a torn scrap of Toby's drawing near an old rusted shovel, a horse with no eyes. She walked for what felt like an hour, until she came to a chamber where the walls shimmered with black stone. Her flashlight beam caught shapes, faces, etched into the walls. Dozens, hundreds, mouths wide, eyes gone. She called out again, and then she saw him. Toby was standing at the center of the room, staring at something in the stone. Dana rushed forward, but stopped. Behind him, crawling from the wall, was a shape, humanoid, but wrong. Too long, too thin. Skin like candle wax stretched over sticks. No eyes. Its face was smooth except for a gaping slit where its mouth should be. "Toby!" Dana screamed. He turned, but his face was empty, blank, as if he wasn't really seeing her at all. The thing whispered, and Toby walked toward it. Dana ran. She grabbed her son and pulled him back, screaming. The creature screeched, high-pitched and shrill, like rusted hinges tearing apart, and the tunnel began to shake. The ceiling crumbled. Stone fell. Dana clutched her son and ran, stumbling through the collapsing shaft, the creature slithering behind them in the dark. They reached the stone door, but it had closed again. She screamed, beat her fists against the stone, and then Toby was pulled from her arms. When Dana woke, she was lying in the grass outside the farmhouse, her hands bloodied, her clothes soaked. The cellar door was gone, buried beneath fresh earth. Toby was gone. They searched for weeks. Police, rescue crews, dogs, but there was no trace. The cellar was declared unstable and collapsed. They blamed the storm. Only Dana knew the truth. The townsfolk stayed quiet. Some avoided her. Some whispered about the hollow beneath cold briar. She moved away eventually, but on some nights, when the wind is just right, she swears she can hear Toby's voice coming up from the earth, whispering lullabies that no child should know. I only met Natalie Granger once, but I remember her eyes, curious, hungry for achievement, and just a bit stubborn. She was 22, fresh out of college, and had taken a summer research internship at Delvin Acres, an aging grain farm tucked into the hills of upstate New York. She wanted field experience for grad school, and Delvin needed help sorting decades of neglected records. The farm hadn't been profitable in years. The silos, 11 of them, lined up like forgotten tombstones on the northern edge of the property, rust eating at their bases, thick vines creeping up their sides. Most were empty. One hadn't been opened since 1998. That was Silo 9. Natalie stayed in the main house with Mr. Delvin, a weathered man in his late 60s who had buried both his wife and his only son. Locals said he never recovered after the boy's death, just let the farm rot slowly around him. On her second week there, Natalie texted a friend, "There's this locked metal door under one of the silos. Mr. D says it's nothing, but I hear weird sounds at night. Scratching, breathing." The friend laughed it off. Natalie didn't. She asked Delvin about it one morning over coffee. "That's old chemical storage," he said without looking up. "We don't open that. Is it dangerous? If you open it, yes. That should have been enough. But ambition, like mold, grows in the dark." Natalie's internship journal was found later. In it, she had written, "Could be a thesis in there. Lost records, maybe even samples. The EPA would love this." She waited until the 4th of July weekend, when Delvin drove into town for fireworks. Armed with bolt cutters and a respirator mask from the barn, she unlocked the hatch beneath Silo 9. Inside was a metal staircase descending into darkness. Her journal says she expected rusted drums and decayed shelves. What she found was worse. The chamber was 40 feet below ground. Concrete walls, warped steel beams, and a thick, warm smell, like rotting corn and ammonia. What Natalie didn't know was that Silo 9 had been used in the 1980s for illegal pesticide trials by a now-defunct agrochemical company. The chemicals had leached into the walls and soil, mutating the fungal spores that naturally grew in grain silos. The experiment was quietly shut down. The silo was sealed. No one thought it necessary to warn the next generation. Natalie wrote her final notes in frantic pen strokes. Walls breathing? No. Just heat. Lights flickering. Smells wrong. Like meat. Found a strange black mold. Not like anything I've seen. Moves slightly when I shine the light. The flashlight she brought was later recovered. The last 10 minutes of footage are shaky. Grainy shadows. A glint of something wet pulsing along the far wall. A sudden burst of coughing. Then a fall. The light spinning. The sounds after that are mostly silence. And then, scrape, scrape, scrape. Mr. Delvin returned the next day. He found the hatch wide open, the bolt cutters on the grass, and Natalie's respirator on the third step down. The sheriff, the hazmat crew, the EPA, they all came. The chamber was sealed again. What they found, they said, was biologically unstable. The spores in the air had a metabolic rate that defied known fungi. The remaining video was classified. Natalie's body was never recovered, only her melted phone and backpack. The chamber was filled with concrete and covered over. Silo 9 was torn down. Mr. Delvin sold the farm months later. But here's the part that never made the news. 3 cleanup workers got sick. 1 went blind. Another lost all their teeth in 3 weeks. The third simply disappeared. The agency buried it all in legal silence. Natalie's parents sued, but the farm's paperwork had been burned in a flood years before. No one took responsibility. I visit that field once a year. I bring flowers and leave them by the scarred patch of earth where Silo 9 once stood. There's no plaque, no sign, just silence. Sometimes when the wind is still and the corn isn't rustling, I swear I can hear something underneath, scratching faintly against the concrete, like someone trying to climb back up.